Hello, Thomas.
Hey, Steve. Hey, Bob.
Hey,
Bob got off.
no, I don't have my video on.
Oh, I know.
What are you doing here?
We missed you.
I miss you too. Oh my
I
God.
know. I think we're here for a very quick item, right, Tom Mullen?
Yeah, that's right. It's the Bobrowski contract.
Oh, yes.
For
Okay,
the Codification.
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really don't know why I'm here.
Neither do I. So it's amazing. I already can see better out of one of my eyes. Like when I look out of my bad eye, my second surgery is Thursday. When I look out of my bad eye, I can't believe that's what I've been seeing like. Like I didn't know how bad it was.
What was the surgery?
Cataract.
Cataract, okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I know I'm a bit on the youngin' side for it, but
I know.
but it's amazing how it's already I can see a difference.
So how painful was the recovery?
Oh my God. Nothing. Zero.
Wow.
Zero. You're awake during the surgery, which is a little freaky. But they give you happy juice, so it's fine.
Yeah.
The worst part about it is for someone like me, and it's probably not as much like if you're 85 and have it done, is you can't bend over, you can't knock into things, you can't carry stuff. So my entire life at home, that's what I do. I pick up. So that's like monitoring my own behavior is tricky, but the recovery is unbelievable.
That's great.
Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Buddy. Hey, Steve.
Hey.
Hi, Joe.
Hey, Joe. How are you?
You guys.
What is today?
Today is February 6th.
February
For
6th.
for about another 5 hours.
Yeah, we should
After
remember
that,
this.
it will no longer be February 6th.
Right.
Good. Are you sure?
At least on this time zone. If you don't like that, travel west. Then you can hold out a little bit longer.
Dan, did you get the minutes that I uploaded?
I did see them. I actually just renamed the file, so it's consistent with all of the other files. So thank you.
All right. Yep.
Hey, Dan, while you're waiting for your panel, your committee to sign on, as I got a couple
Yep.
minutes, are you planning to have anything in the May town meeting or waiting to November?
We plan on having a whole bunch of things in the Maytown meeting.
You do? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
That's actually part of what is on the agenda for today. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got 5 articles that are pretty much ready.
Okay.
We've been busy.
Yeah. No, I just didn't know whether you were how you were gonna do it. So either way is fine.
5 for May, and if any of them need to get tabled or anything further, we will.
Okay.
So one of them, which is chapter 175, that's street names and numbers, that's being done in conjunction with planning.
Okay. So that includes the streets. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's just some small things, and some of these will come up again,
Oh, yeah.
and then they'll come up again. Given that
On-
we just completed having Groundhog Day, it seems appropriate.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
say again. Okay, who wants to have the fun of being the stenographer for this meeting?
I'll do it.
Okay, Anne has nominated herself, and I'm going to appoint Anne for that one. Today, Joe,
Yes.
you are off the hook. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thanks. Thanks, Ann.
Okay, and with that, I believe
Yeah.
we have a quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, made 6. There's 6 of us. We have a quorum. With that, it is 7:01, so we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Pleasure to see you on a relatively warm day, at least after this weekend. Can say that, you know, it's like 40 degrees warmer than it was on Saturday,
Mhm.
and still only about freezing. So pretty amazing as to what can happen here. So we have a couple of people on here who are technically members of the public, although certainly well involved. Steve, Bob, you all qualify as members of the public as well. If you'd like to talk as part of the public engagement, otherwise you're certainly welcome to participate in any other topic as well.
I'm fine, thanks.
So with that, administratively, we have the minutes. Joe posted those into Dropbox for January 3rd. Have people had the opportunity to review them?
Yes.
I'm seeing some nods. Okay, with that, do we have a motion to approve the minutes? And we will discuss to approve the minutes as presented, and then we can have discussion on them as needed.
So moved.
Okay, Anne is moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Tim takes himself off of mute to second that promptly. Joe, you're slow on the uptake for that one.
I didn't think
Oh.
I could approve my own minutes. That's why I don't know.
You can.
You
I
can.
Oh,
You, in my opinion, now that we're discussing it, I think you did a fine job of taking the minutes. Thank you very much. Greatly
Yeah,
appreciated.
Short and sweet.
And it has the required elements of where it was, when it was, who was there, and what we discussed. And when it adjourned, along with a list of all of the votes that were taken, how they were taken, and what the results of them were. So with that, any feedback, thoughts on the minutes of January 3rd? Seeing none, we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented. With that, since it's by Zoom, we will take this by roll call. I will do the roll call as you appear on my screen. So with that, Anne,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
and I vote yes. That's unanimous. Minutes are approved. I'll go ahead, put a footer on them that they have been approved, send them off. Thank you very much, Joe. And you're up next for the next meeting, since you're taking the minutes for this one. We
Fine.
are caught up in all of our submissions for that. So just so everyone knows, once minutes are approved, we send 2 copies off. One copy gets sent off to Sherry Dalton to get posted to the website. And so if you go to the Bylaw Review Committee, you'll see that she handles that side of the posting. A second copy goes off to the records officer for the town, which is our esteemed clerk, Betsy Sharon. So I send her a copy of the minutes as well. That way, in case there is a records request, she can try to fulfill it directly without having to necessarily come back to us. And those are actually also required under our bylaws to send those so that those 2 actions take place.
Can-
Okay,
Dan, can I ask a question on that as a member of the
Sure.
public?
absolutely.
Do we need to, or maybe Tom Mullen can jump in, since everything is on the website now? Do we also need to send something to the town clerk's office? I don't know the answer to that. It just seems duplicative, but maybe there's a reason other than our bylaw that we need to.
There's nothing in state law that requires that the minutes be sent to the town clerk at all.
I think it may be something for the committee to consider. I know that's one of your bylaws is one of our bylaws is around the recording of minutes. Just seems that everything's on the website now, maybe.
Mhm.
And we can print it if anybody asks for it. Just a thought.
It is, the primary reason behind when we set this up in 2018, just knowing some of the history, was to make it so that it would be faster for the records officer, presuming that it remains Betsy, to be able to locate things in her own filing mechanism. Because not everything gets to the website necessarily in a timely fashion. So not every committee, board, commission has a page on the website. While they should theoretically, they don't all actually have that. And so if they don't, then a copy does need to go somewhere where it can be accessed reasonably easily by the records officer. So that's the reason for having that separation. And eventually we might even have in-person meetings again. So in which case, depending upon how things get approved, especially when you get to subcommittee meetings and you get to meetings that are outside of the town council's appointing power, that becomes actually more important. So if we look at like school committee and school committee subcommittees, where they may or may not even be directly accessible from the town website, it may be much more significant so that if the copy goes to the records officer, aka Betsy, it may make things easier. That's the reasoning behind it. I would think that someone could search the website for whatever they're looking for too.
I think every committee should, and I think 99% of them do. There may be ones that don't, and that they should. And for subcommittees, like for the finance committee that has many subcommittees, we put all those on their regular website minutes, just as ease of people searching now. But just a thought.
Absolutely. And something as we come back to chapter 9, which is on the agenda, we can certainly take a look at it.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, item number 4, contract for professional assistants. This is going to go over to you, Tom. This is the contract with Mr. Bobrowski.
Yeah, so I sent to Dan in advance of the meeting, and I hope you all have a copy of the hopefully final draft of the agreement with Professor Bobrowski to do the recodification of our zoning bylaws. This draft has the town paying $45,000 for the work, which would include a first meeting with our committee, and then a total of 4 subsequent meetings to refine things like the table of use definitions, residential issues like home occupation, and business issues such as signs. And then based on the input that Professor Bobrowski gets from our committee and others, he will refine the draft recodification, and eventually he will have a version to present to town meeting. He will also make himself available for subsequent meetings, if we wish, on a kind of a la carte basis, where he would bill us at $250 an hour, including travel time. So I certainly recommend that the town proceed with this. Professor Bobrowski is the definitive expert on Massachusetts land use and planning. Something I would never have conceded when he and I were at swords points in a litigation involving the city of Gloucester. But he's written the definitive book, and we hired him in Linfield to do similar work. He did an excellent job. So I think this committee should make its recommendation to the town council, and the town council, hopefully at their next meeting, will authorize Steve to sign the contract on behalf of the town.
Thank you very much.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, I have a very well-used, worn, binding, broken book, which is Attorney Bobrowski's land use and planning that I used a lot in my practice, so I still have it in my office.
Excellent. So thank you for the presentation and the support, Steve, that greatly appreciated. The draft was circulated to the committee so that it's available for them to look at. I think that with the changes that were put in, my opinion is that we should accept and recommend this particular contract. I think it will serve the town well. For those who may not remember, the town at the May town meeting last year authorized $50,000 for this purpose. So as a specific expenditure, that money has been authorized. If for some reason we need additional, we will need to go back to either the town council and finance committee or to town meeting for additional authorization. At this point, I can't say whether that is anticipated or not, but we do have the ability to go beyond the 4 meetings. Given our tenacity for detail, that may be needed. That's a part of the reason for making sure that was built in. Otherwise, the actual base rate, I think it seems very reasonable given the amount of work that it will take to actually rewrite the zoning bylaws to be consistent with mass general laws and the general updates that are needed. There's a lot of conflict in the current bylaws themselves. And as we get into that piece, there will be a whole lot of meetings. So we can get through some of the language and understand how those pieces really work. I know that Joe and his work on the ZBA has to try and interpret a lot of this, and clarity of language will certainly make things easier. It will also add a little bit of complexity in that any pre-existing uses will be covered under current zoning, because you can't really take away current uses very easily, but it will be a good service for the town. So those are my thoughts. But as people have questions, thoughts, Tom is here to try and answer on behalf of the legal side of the town to make sure the contract meets our needs as best as possible.
I would think this is, I hate to say no brainer because every time I say that, a garage doesn't get built. But I would think that this is something that we really should do based on the expertise that he can offer. This is complicated. Part of the mass general laws and zoning law that we just don't have collectively. So I feel like we should absolutely do this. And then for the 4 meetings, $250 an hour for any subsequent work is not outrageous as well. So I say yes.
Yeah, I'm a yes vote too. Dan, are we taking a vote here or is it just a recommendation?
We will take a vote
You take a
to
vote.
make the formal recommendation to the town council. The town
Okay.
council ultimately is responsible for authorizing Steve to sign the contract, and then Professor Bobrowski can work with us once the contract's signed. That's my understanding.
Yep.
Others, thoughts, comments?
Just going through it, I did notice that the $45,000 fee, when you break it into the first, second, and third payments, those different payments add up to 40,000. So we just need to amend one of the payment schedules so it's consistent.
Oh, good point.
I believe it was originally going to be 40,000 and then it was changed to 45 to accommodate additional pieces.
I think the 5,000 goes to us, right? No,
No,
good try.
Tom, any suggestions on, you have the prior drafts, is it, do you know if it's always been 45,000 or if it was originally 40?
You know, I'm sorry, I don't recall.
Okay,
Let me speak to Bobrowski, but you're certainly right. The amount needs to be reconciled.
obviously preference would be 40,000 with the expectation that the other 5,000 would absolutely be earned in extra meetings.
Yeah.
Dan, when did you send that? Do I have, I don't think I found that. Did you send on the last email? Or was it way back?
It's in Dropbox. It was
Oh, it's in the
posted.
Dropbox.
Yeah, it was posted on February 1st.
Oh, for some reason my Dropbox didn't pop up. I'll look at it now.
Catherine, Kevin, Lisa, thoughts?
Seems pretty straightforward. I see no reason not to make the recommendation to town council.
So given that we have a reconciliation issue, there are a couple of ways that come to mind of how we can address that reasonably. It's all below the authorized amount. So I don't see there being an authorization issue. It's just a matter of being clear in our vote as to what our recommendation is. And my suggestion on this, and Tom, please correct me if this is out of bounds, is that we can make a recommendation to town council that this contract get approved for up to $45,000 and leave it at your discretion with Mr. Bobrowski, Professor Bobrowski, as to how that differential gets appropriately handled, whether it's a change to the payment schedule or whether it's a change to the total.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Thanks.
So I'm going to make the motion that we recommend the contract for up to $45,000 with the discretion of the reconciliation being done by Town Council Mullen to the Town Council, just to confuse things further. That we recommend this contract be authorized to be entered into by Steve Mayo as town administrator, so that we can then begin work on the recodification. So is there a second?
Second.
Anne is the quick on the second. So any further discussion? With that, we will again do roll call in the order in which you are on my screen. Anne,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
and I vote in the affirmative, and that is voted unanimously. So that, Steve, if we can ask you as
Yep.
you're working with the town council to make sure that gets onto their next agenda.
This is already on the agenda for the a week from today, so the 13th. If you can send me an email afterwards on behalf of the Bylaw Review Committee, Mr. Chairman, that you approved it, that'd be helpful just to put in the package, and we'll have that ready to go.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we have 5 articles for town meeting that have been prepared by the esteemed town council Mullen. So chapters 1, 4, 9, 21, and 175. And I put them in that order just because that's how they're numbered in the current book. All of these were provided into Dropbox, and the file names indicate which article they're for. So with that, first one is Article 1, and the idea behind this is that if we approve these particular draft town meeting articles, then they will get submitted to the town council when the warrant opens, likely next month, for the technically April, May town meeting that will occur. And that way these will be ready for that town meeting. So chapter 1.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to leave you. I came what I got to do. Thank you.
If you have any other comments, the other one you might have thoughts on is snow and ice, because I'm not sure if you've heard any feedback on that, given that we finally had some.
Oh, on the
The snow and ice bylaw.
yeah,
It's not one that we're planning on modifying at the moment, but it is on the agenda.
okay. No, we haven't had any snow either, so it's been good. It's been a good year.
At least
No,
from budget.
I haven't heard anything either way on it, so.
Okay, I wasn't sure if the DPW tried to do any enforcement or anything in the few plausible events that we've had.
I would say in most of the cases, we actually went out and talked to the property owner and threatened them to get it done, and they normally did quickly. So it was more about clearing the streets than getting any money. So as long as they worked with us, we were good.
Sounds good. Excellent. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Okay, with that, sharing my screen. Are you able to see the screen appropriately? Excellent. Okay, so chapter 1. These are changes that have been requested, updating licenses and permits. And Tom did a really good job of making this easy to understand what is being stricken and replaced. So instead of having officers or board, change it to public body. For word usage, couple of changes to make sure the word person shall mean natural persons. Couple of other changes, including gender, making sure that it's available to all genders. And again, border town officers with public body. Questions, thoughts on chapter 1 changes, which is definitions? Okay, with that, have your mute buttons ready to unmute. We're going to have a motion opportunity here. It's kind of like Jeopardy. So do we have a motion to recommend the draft town meeting article for chapter 1 to be referred to the town council to be included into the spring 2023 town meeting?
So moved.
Joe
Second.
is fast on the buzzer and Ann is fast on the second. Catherine's laughing that she just wasn't fast enough on the mute button. Okay, so with that, we've got motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Kevin? I'm picking on you because there was a noise and so it put you as the forefront.
Hey, Dan, I just have one point to bring up. We're sure to get this, I think, at town meeting, where we change 1-5F to say words importing any gender may apply to any and all genders. I mean, I'm old and out of it enough so that I have difficulty answering the question, why are there more than 2 genders? My question to you is, 1, are there more than 2? And 2, if you believe there are, who's going to make that case to town meeting when the inevitable objection arises?
Great question. I will take a stab at it, and others, please feel free to chime in, agree, disagree, and otherwise. It is an open meeting. So the actual answer is yes, there are more than 2 genders. There are at least 2 genders and more than that are recognized by most health organizations. In addition to what most people call male and female, there is another gender that is very common, as in more than 1% of population, called intersex. And that's where the genders are not as clearly defined. So that's an example of one. In addition, there are states and countries that acknowledge that there are additional genders that may not be as clearly defined. And an example is in Germany, where you can actually have, instead of M or F, you can use the letter X to indicate it's something else. It's not necessarily how someone is presenting that they necessarily have to have only two genders. Many languages only are by their very nature gendered, male and female, especially a lot of classical languages. But there are in fact more than two genders. If we take a look at native languages, many of the native languages encompass more than two genders as well. So it is something that there are more than two genders that are recognized, that are now recognized legally, including in Massachusetts. And so this allows us to actually be consistent with Massachusetts law. Massachusetts RMV allows you to actually choose additional genders as well. So you may not have gotten a driver's license in the last couple of years, but in fact, you can choose MF, and I don't remember what I believe it's X for theirs as well. Yep, that sounds correct.
X.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say to Tom, do you think that we might stop any chatter if we say words importing any gender may apply to all genders?
I
know
don't
it's
think that,
small.
see, I don't think that helps. I think that
Okay.
the use of the word all is what I think may cause some indigestion.
Words importing any gender may apply.
I wonder if the simplest response, if it does come up at town meeting, is just to, indicate that since 2019, Massachusetts has allowed the gender X on licenses. And so we're just trying to make sure that everybody is covered by these laws, as I think we all have an interest to ensure.
Okay.
Without going into, right, like, I think there's a lot more that could be said about it, but I wonder if that's the sort of simplest answer, is just to defer to Massachusetts law.
Mhm.
I think we have Catherine answer that.
Yeah, I mean, one of us could stand up. Okay, Catherine certainly could, to answer it. We could take it, make it clear it came from us, but I think you're exactly right, Catherine. I think we answer it very simply.
Hmm.
And the fact that Mass allows for X,
Hmm.
we're just encompassing that.
Okay.
Good feedback, and I think having the preparation will be there. I still think, Catherine, you gave a really eloquent response, so would not mind having your response at town meeting if and when this issue does come up.
I'm happy to do so. I actually don't know. I'm not a citizen. I'm allowed to be on this committee, but I'm not sure if I'm allowed to just speak up at town meeting because I'm not a registered voter.
We can have you admitted, if
Yeah.
that, which won't be a problem.
Great.
Tom, does that answer your question in a way that you're comfortable with?
Yeah, I think that would be a quick way to end what would
Mhm.
otherwise threaten to be an uncomfortable and lengthy and pointless debate.
Agreed. Other thoughts? Okay, so the motion on the floor is to recommend the draft town meeting article to revise chapter 1 of the general bylaws as presented. Any other discussion? Otherwise, we'll go to a vote in the order in which you are on my screen. Anne,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
and you are allowed to vote here. Kevin,
Yes.
and I vote in the affirmative, and this is voted in. Okay. Next up is Article 4. This is again relatively simple one, just try and keep things consistent. It also shows progress by the committee in less than a year to actually have several articles is quite impressive. So this one is going ahead and just making some minor changes, changing the words financial year with fiscal year, just to be consistent with the terminology, changing the words board and committee to public body. And then getting rid of the column that's not needed under maximum expenditure. Okay, again, get ready on your mute buttons to unmute. We have a motion to approve chapters 4 and 5 of the general bylaws to forward the draft town meeting article to revise chapters 4 and 5 of the general bylaws to the town council for the spring 2023 town meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Kevin is fast on the movement. Tim is fast on the second. We're making sure that we get everyone here. Lisa, we're gonna need to get you fast on the buzzer. Okay. Want to make sure everyone gets involved here. Okay, any discussion? There being no discussion. Go to approve this in the order in which you appear on my screen. Anne,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Unanimous as well. Okay, that takes care of two of the articles. Next up is chapter 9. Chapter 9 has a few changes. I anticipate that there will be additional changes that will probably want to come up in the future on chapter, actually that'll be on chapter 35, most likely for meetings. So chapter 9, we may have additional changes here too. This is on general governance and how boards, committees, and commissions operate. So first things up, we'll take a motion, get ready to be fast on your buzzer. Lisa's already on it. Okay. Oh, do we have a motion to take the draft town meeting article to revise chapter 9 of the bylaws, refer to town council for inclusion in the warrant for the spring 2023 town meeting?
So moved.
Lisa moves. Who's going to second? Who's going to be fast on that?
I second.
Oh.
And beats Catherine for this one. Catherine, you'll be fast next time. Okay. Any discussion for this? There's a variety of changes. These have been discussed at a few different meetings. Changing vacancies to make it that a member may be dropped and vacancy filled if a member is no longer at any meetings. Procedures and reports to get rid of the words to include and make it including, so it's better language. And otherwise it's relatively minor changes to the language itself. Where there is a change is in E, location posting of meetings, that anything explicitly that says or shall be conducted remotely by electronic means. That's new because when this was last visited, we were told, and Tom may remember this, and Bob will probably remember this, we will never have remote meetings in Wakefield. It just can't happen. And people like to meet in person. We will not do meetings by the internet. I believe it was some words to that effect. I think pretty close. But then, of course, COVID happened. And then finally, section, it relates to minutes of meetings. This is where there, to Tom's point, it specifically says that a copy of all minutes shall be sent to the town clerk and to the website. Depending upon who's managing the website, it is up to the body to know that. And hopefully the bodies know who's responsible for their website. It does vary depending upon who is on the town body, as to who controls the town body itself. So with that, we had a motion made and seconded.
I have a question.
Sure, Tim.
So on section E, in terms of changing this, so, meetings can be remote by electronic means in accordance with law. I guess my question would be, if Massachusetts law change, once, I know there's probably a temporary year or two rule. Let's say they say, hey, if towns want to continue to have meetings 100% remotely, they are allowed to do that. Are we all on board with going forward? Let's say the school committee wants to meet remotely going forward. Does this wording would probably give them the ability, or any committee, to always meet remotely? Correct? Is that just, I'm just, just want to make sure I understand what the intent of this is. And maybe do we want to add wording that, maybe the chair of a committee needs to be in person? I know there's a lot, different ways you could look at this, but I just, want to make sure that, I know right now there's this kind of temporary rule from the state, but going forward by this change, does that mean, we give any committee carte blanche that if they want to meet remotely down the road, they have that ability?
So if I could just chime in, I think the clause in accordance with applicable law was put in there to address that situation. Basically, we're being agnostic about this. If we are required to have somebody like the chair physically present in a brick and mortar meeting room, then that's what we have to do.
And Tom, you probably know more about the latest updates that have happened to the open meeting law as it pertains to remote meetings. Was that codified going forward, or does that still have a sunset date?
I think it still has a sunset date.
Yeah.
We're waiting to see what the legislature will do about it.
And I don't recall whether Wakefield subsequently did adopt remote meetings explicitly or not. Well, I vaguely think that there was a vote by town council to allow for it. So, Tim, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty agnostic on it. I could foresee, and this kind of probably depends what the state ends up doing down the road would be how it would see. But I just could foresee, let's say there was a contentious issue down the road with the town council or school committee, and the committee doesn't want to be in a room with angry parents or something. So they say, let's do it 100% remote where we can control mute buttons and stuff. And so, that's kind of, I'm agnostic on it, but I just, I could foresee this down the road coming into play potentially if the bylaws do not have any wording around how should do town committee meetings need to be in person regardless of what the state law says.
I know that for disability commissions, they explicitly have the right to meet remotely. That's specifically by the state. So there are some carve-outs already as to what the town will do on a wide basis and whether we want to try and enforce that at a bylaw level. I'm not sure that that's necessarily the right place to enforce that change in light of changing state laws. And the reason why I'm just expressing that concern is that it takes a fair amount of time to update bylaws. Not a huge amount of time, it takes typically around 6 months. But for us to get something ready, go to the town warrant, from the town warrant, if it gets passed, then to go through the Attorney General's review, then to actually get published. So it's usually a minimum of about 6 months to make a change, which is not an interminable amount of time, but it is much more significant than, say, the ability for the town council to adopt, or I'm not sure if they can unadopt the ability to have town bodies have remote meetings or put other limits on it. But if they have the ability to do that, I would rather have that to be a bit more dynamic. Or if we're going to put bylaws around when that needs to occur, that I would think that would be separate than just in the location and posting of minutes. Or location and posting of meetings themselves. So I hear where you're coming from, and I think you're onto something significant. I'm not sure that we're quite ready to tackle that with an uncertain environment. There was a brief expiration of open meeting law. It almost impacted us last summer. And it's something that I know the state is going to have to address, because there are a lot of municipalities that are having really good engagement in this new hybrid way of doing things. Other thoughts?
I'm not sure, and I totally see Tim's concern, and I understand, I can imagine some, issues we've had recently where that concern would have been underscored if people were not meeting remotely. But I think my feeling is maybe with Dan that I don't know the bylaws is where to address that. I think if that comes to happen, it needs to be addressed with each individual committee. So if the school committee wanted to just be on Zoom because there was a very uncomfortable issue and parents they thought were going to be, vocal or aggressive, I think the pushback has to go just to that committee and for them to explain why being on Zoom was appropriate. And then they can be voted out. I mean, that will take several months, but I feel like that's where it belongs more than maybe with our committee.
Other thoughts? Thoughts, comments, concerns? Seeing none. Motion is to approve the chapter 9, to send that to town council for adoption for the warrant for the spring town meeting as presented. With that, we'll take a vote in the order in which you appear on my screen. So Anne, box is on you first.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
and I vote in the affirmative as well. Okay, that brings us chapter 9. Next up is chapter 21. This is just a correction of effectively a spelling error. Deleting the word disposition and the word counselors, replacing counselors to council. So it's no longer individual counselors that are responsible, but the town council in its entirety for disposition of surplus supplies. I think, is that an appropriate summarization of this, Tom?
Yes.
Okay, so with that, do we have a motion? Catherine and
So
Lisa, you
moved.
can get ready. Well, first we have to have the motion, and then you can jump on it. We have a motion to take the draft town article for chapter 21 of the general bylaws referred to town council for inclusion in the spring 2023 town warrant.
So moved.
Catherine gets the movement. Who's going to second this?
Second.
Tim is faster than Lisa on this one. Tim gets the second. Okay, with that, any discussion? As Tom Edward would say on the article before you, this is the draft article. And it looks like our good friend Eric will be joining us.
And if you can record that Eric is joining us at 7:45. Have
Certainly.
another person joining. Excellent. Eric, if your audio is working, you're welcome to let us know. Excellent. Welcome. So we're going over in the agenda itself, we're on item 5, subsection D, chapter 21 surplus supplies. So there's been a motion on the floor to approve the draft town meeting article for chapter 21 as presented and send it to the town council for inclusion in the spring 2023 town warrant. So with that, we will do voting in the order in which you appear on my screen. Eric is now the last person to appear. So everyone who has been participating thus far, you're in the same order that you have been. So Anne,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Eric.
I have to say yes. No choice.
Yeah. Good choice, and I vote in the affirmative. So with that, we have 8-0 unanimous, and this article is also moved. This brings us over to a rather interesting situation for chapter 175. Is the last of the articles that we have for today. So I'll first make the motion, then we'll have a discussion that we move that we'll be looking for someone to make a motion to move the proposed street name change bylaw, which will be a new adoption, a new Article 5 of Chapter 175 of the general bylaws, to recommend in conjunction with the planning board that this go to the town council for inclusion on the town warrant. It may be actually sponsored by the planning board at their discretion. Otherwise, we can sponsor it with their at their preference is the way that I'm going to recommend it. So that since they created it, if they wish to sponsor it, I think we let them sponsor it, and then we will lend support. So giving them the discretion, but otherwise it'll go forward nonetheless. So do we have a motion to recommend the proposed street name change bylaw, Article 5, Chapter 175, and deferring to the planning board for the sponsorship as at their discretion?
Hey, Dan, can you show the entire document? I can only see like the first page.
I will show it at the moment. It's a pretty long document.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It's 2 pages.
We just had a bunch of changes a few months ago when we talked about it, right?
Correct. And
they're
I
all
believe
incorporated.
those have all been included. Is that correct, Tom?
Best as I could, yes.
Yeah, I just figured out when this meeting started that I don't have access to your Dropbox, so I haven't been able to look at any of this stuff. That's my fault. So
I will make sure that you have the ability to view everything in the Dropbox following this meeting. Okay, so do we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, Kevin's made a motion. Who's going to be fast on the second?
I'll second.
Joe seconds. So with that, we've got motion for new Article 5 of Chapter 175 for street names and numbers. And again, if the planning board wishes to sponsor this article, they will have the option to do so. Any discussion on the article? This has significant changes based upon the discussions that we've had previous.
So my only question, and Dan, I think we spoke about this way back in October. We had some discussion around in section B, the application process, potentially requiring the applicant to have some number of signatures from residents on the street being changed and or townspeople. It looks like the planning board, like none of that was incorporated. I just don't, do you recall any conversations or feedback from the planning board on that particular item? Or Tom as well?
So I guess I forget whether this is something that the planning board brought up, but one concern I'd have is the length of streets and the number of abutters varies tremendously in Wakefield. You know, with a street like Main Street having hundreds of abutting properties, and there are little side streets that have one. So I don't know that a one size fits all approach would do. And, you know, if somebody wants to make the case, I don't know that we necessarily need to exclude them because they couldn't get some percentage of their fellows to sign a petition.
Part of this is that the application process does require that written notification go to all of the abutters. And at no financial risk to the town, because the fee is minimum filing fee of $800, but it can be significantly more if the cost to the town is more. That's one of the changes that was made to protect the town. If someone would say change Main Street, which would cost significantly more than that just with the mailings. Other changes that have been made at the suggestion of this body and planning board is to make sure that there is a appropriate timing for when things go into effect, not to be less than 120 days nor more than 1 year from the vote of town council to adopt the change. And then if there is an appeal, it would be actually from the time that it goes into effect. There's a 30-day appeal process by which someone could go to the state for potential recourse, although there is an expiration to that as well. But part of this is that it makes sure that if there's going to be a name change, there's a time for this where the town council could potentially revisit and undo an issue before it was adopted. If someone were to find out after a vote, they could request it to be reconsidered. Whether it would be successful or not is a whole separate issue. Questions, thoughts?
So Dan, the planning board has looked at this draft over and they concur with the draft that's being presented tonight.
I don't know that they've met since this draft was published by Tom last week. It was sent to both us and the planning board.
Well, I don't know, shouldn't the bylaws review committee wait to hear back from the planning board before you vote to send this forward to the town council? Or are you voting to say that the bylaws review committee is satisfied with this language? And then the next step is going to be for the planning board to see whether they concur with the language. And then if the planning board is the one that's going to present this at town meeting, wouldn't they be the one to bring this up to the town council as opposed to the bylaw review committee? I'm not sure about that part of the process.
So you're spot on. The motion itself says that this is set to go forward, and the planning board will have meetings between now and will presumably have meetings between now and the opening of the town warrant. And they will have the ability to move this forward. And provided that they wish to sponsor it, it will go under their sponsorship with the support of the bylaw review committee. And that the motion's very specific to that. So that if they don't want to sponsor it for whatever reason, then the bylaw review committee, which has now reviewed this, will then sponsor it in lieu of them. If there's a concern by the planning board, it'll come back to us and we'll have the ability to withdraw it or move for indefinite postponement, depending upon when that is determined. So the idea is to give the planning board our recommendation that yes, we believe this is sufficient and meets the current needs. And if they have any major issues, I fully expect we will know about it in short order. And Tom will certainly know about it.
So Dan, based on what Bob just said, does it make sense that the motion should not be to send this to town council as presented, then to be forwarded to town meeting? Wouldn't it be to send it to the planning board for their concurrence? Because if we're going to pull it anyways, if they have a big problem with it, is it more streamlined to have them look at it and say, yeah, it's fine?
We can
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
we can certainly do it both either way. And if the committee wishes to not to just do it as a supportive measure of the planning board and require them to push it forward, that's fine too. Thoughts?
My recollection at the fall town meeting is that this was a warrant article proposed by the planning board, who then withdrew, if that's the right term, that warrant at the meeting, and then decided that they wanted to consult with the bylaws review committee in terms of putting together a more a better prepared, for lack of a better phrase, warrant article, bylaw and subsequent warrant article for the Springtown meeting. So and then Tom put this together. It seems to me the planning board would review it first and then make whatever changes they have and then provide it to the bylaws review committee once again, because they're asking for the bylaws review committee to opine on their work product. And then the bylaws review committee would then be able to vote on it. And then I still do think the planning board would be the one that would bring this to the attention of the town council and request it as a warrant article and indicate to the town council that the bylaws review committee has already reviewed it and they concur with the language in the draft bylaw. That's kind of what I thought the process would be on this one.
Given the way that it was handled at the November town meeting, I think that either body can bring it forward, and I think that we let the planning board decide if they wish to. And so the way that the current motion is set up is that the planning board has the option of moving forward with it. And it would be my recommendation that they sponsor it. That would be my personal preference, as opposed to having bylaw review sponsor the article. But either way, I think that there's been a need that's been identified and at this point ready for codification. So if to require them to visit it first before we do on the same draft, I think just gets us into a process issue. And given that we're not set to have another meeting until next month, it could present an issue. If there's any changes of substance, and that we will certainly have to re-review those changes, because what we are recommending is a very specific version of language. But given that this draft just came out last week, I don't think that the planning board has had the opportunity to review it. I don't think that from my attending their meetings, that they have much appetite for any additional change to this bylaw. Of course, one never knows. Public bodies can be in interesting places. Tom lives there. Thoughts?
Dan, I agree with you. I think if we just pass it forward and then town council, if they decide to, like rip it to shreds, then it probably won't go anywhere past them, right? That's what you're saying.
I think town council may ask, and Bob, jump in if I'm wrong, but I'm just thinking as myself, that I think town council may ask, if this is presented to them, have you consulted with the planning board and have you heard back from them?
Yeah, I mean, two things about this. First, the town council is not going to tear this to shreds because we don't have any authority other than to send it forward as a warrant article for the town meeting. But I know that the first question I will ask if Dan is presenting this on behalf of the bylaws review committee is, why isn't the planning board here, considering the planning board sponsored this article at the fall town meeting? And at one point in time, did the bylaws review committee take this proposed bylaw over from the planning board? It seems to me it was the planning board's idea to sponsor this as a warrant article for the fall town meeting. They pulled it. Then they wanted consultation with both Tom Mullen and with the bylaws review committee. So it seems to me, and I may be completely wrong on this, but it seems to me that if the planning board decides they no longer want to sponsor this article, I don't even know why the bylaws review committee would present this for the spring.
Bob, I misspoke. I meant the planning board. I said town council by accident, but I meant the planning board. So you're correct.
I like to shred stuff, but I don't have the shred it. But I know that once again, this is my fault because I didn't have access to Dropbox. So I'm looking at this for the first time and I can't find my notes from October, but my recollection from our bylaws review committee before the fall town meeting is we had a lot of concerns about what was presented to the bylaws review committee by the planning board. And I don't know. I mean, I know one of the ones I addressed was the appeal rights, which is the bottom section there, E, and that looks like it does comport with the state law, which it did before the original draft. I'm just not sure that the contents that we're looking at here is what the planning board wants, because we don't have any input back from them. But in the end, I thought you were also meeting on the 21st of February. So if your next meeting's not until March, then it does make sense for you to send this forward to the planning board. And then if you hear back from the planning board and they decide that they have substantive changes, then you'll have to look at those changes and see if you acquiesce to that as well. I mean, on this one, I would think at town meeting, you're like the finance committee. You get up and you say the bylaws review committee agrees with the warrant article as presented by the planning board. Am I wrong about that, Tom?
No, actually, my recollection of what happened at town meeting is the same as yours, Bob. And I agree. I think this is really something that we should let the planning board run with. It was their idea. We had some refinements that we wanted to make. And I think that what we've got now is something that's going to be acceptable to both committees. But as Dan has said, the planning board has not yet had a chance to weigh in.
So what we're really working with here is just a matter of the timing so that we can make sure that we have something ready for the town, for the spring town meeting. I have been requested to have this reviewed at this meeting, ideally by the planning board. So they definitely are keen to take action. And the way that the current motion is set up, it allows them the ability to sponsor it without any further action. And if they sponsor it, then we just lend our support, and that's very clear.
Okay. That's fine.
Others' thoughts?
I have a thought. May I continue?
Sure.
I look at part E and it says appeal rights. It tells who can appeal. I look at part D and it says action by town council. Look at part C and it just says public hearing. I would change that title to public hearing by the planning board, just to indicate who acts there, and the rest of the words stay the same. In other words, sometimes the article, the paragraphs are passive and sometimes they're active voice. And I would make it active voice by changing the title to public hearing by the planning board. I can be cheerfully outvoted.
Tom, thoughts on that? We'll listen to your
I-
voice.
Yeah, I'm really indifferent.
As a title, I'm not sure. I don't disagree with your assertion. I'm not sure that the change provides much value, given that the next words are the planning board. That's it. That's where I'm just looking at it and saying, okay, if there's a public hearing, if it was buried in the language, I think I would probably want to make it more clear, but it's just the formatting is where my thoughts are on that. I don't think there's going to be any confusion. Your point on difference between active voice and passive voice, that could be dependent upon how much coffee the person who is doing the typing had at the moment.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that part of this was written at night, part of this was written in the morning. Just my guess.
Mhm.
Others' thoughts? Eric, is it something that you think needs to be changed of significance, or?
No, I just had this thought while I was listening to everything. If no one, I ran it up the flagpole and no one else saluted. Yeah. To use a phrase way back 50 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I like the analogy. Okay, so with that, we've got a motion. It's been made and seconded. So we'll again take roll call based on the order in which you appear on my screen. So we'll start with you, Ann.
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
and I vote in the affirmative. Excellent. We are all unanimous today. Apparently, we're going to have to find some other things to disagree about. It won't be this. Okay, so with that, we've gone through the articles for town meeting. We now have 5 articles that we are moving forward for town meeting, one that will hopefully be recommended formally by the planning board. That's actually, given that the appointments for this committee happened last year, quite impressive. Just my 2 cents for what it's worth to actually have this much ready this early. Of course, we still have a lot of work ahead of us, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So moving along, item 6, and we'll go for a while, and then we will defer anything that we want to defer going forward. So reviewing bylaws. First, an Ecode 360 update. So Ecode 360 is the town's website. There were a variety of different issues that have been found by members and others. Those issues have largely been, I think at this point, all of the issues have been finally resolved. If you do see anything on Ecode 360 that is not accurate or updated, please feel free to let me know, and I will forward that off to Sherry Dalton, who is leading the effort of getting Eco 360 updated. There were a variety of issues with everything from chapter 104 on dogs and animals to 175 and these and snow and ice bylaw that weren't updated over the last several years, and those language issues have since been resolved. In addition, there was one issue that was improperly formed, I think is a appropriate way of putting it, Tom. And I think that has been since submitted to the Attorney General for correction. Is that correct?
It will be this week. It's not done yet. I haven't received it from Erin Kokinda and the town clerk just yet.
So there was only a portion of a article was sent off for prior approval, so that's being corrected from years ago. It's identified, being corrected, and hopefully will be addressed in short order. So with that, since we've actually had snow and ice for the first time really this winter, brings us to chapter 175, sections 8 and 9, which have been successfully updated. I will share screen over here. So now that we've actually had some snow and ice, the last several meetings, we anticipated that we'd have snow and ice, but well, Mother Nature had other thoughts. Any thoughts? We heard from Steve Mayo earlier that he had not heard anything negative on on the snow and ice Article 3 section. Any other thoughts, things that you've seen and or heard from community members on this?
Dan, I'm wondering if you had the chance to reach out to the Safe Streets Committee on this and whether they had any input.
Last time I reached out to them on this, they didn't really have much. I think part of it is they hadn't, I'm not sure that they had all seen the correct language.
Okay.
But I will reach out to them again. There's the Safe Streets working group that I have direct connections to, so I will notify them. The correct language was sent out by the Chamber of Commerce to all chamber members in most businesses and town boards, and I have not heard anything negative from that side, which I think bodes well that people don't seem to have a problem with the language. Where, of course, it starts to really come into play is when the language and the actual action and enforcement collide. The key piece of that I see is being most likely for having resistance is section D, which is the extent of clearing, making sure that snow, slush, and ice is removed from the sidewalk at least 36 inches, and in particular, all ramps, regular access points to the street, marked entries to the street where a crosswalk exists. So for anyone who's required to abide by this bylaw, they can't just create a path and plow in so that there is not access to the street. And we have seen that done in the past, and this becomes a real issue. If someone obviously is seeing a city plow or town plow creating a problem, notify the DPW and they will change their plowing accordingly. The town does not have the right to violate this either. Thoughts? Otherwise, we'll plan on keeping this on the agenda throughout the rest of the winter, provided that we have more below freezing weather. This past weekend notwithstanding. This brings us over to chapter 36, meetings. Not sure how many of you were at the town meeting that we had about a week and a half ago. very well attended town meeting on a single issue, and that was the high school. There were a couple of issues that I saw come up at that particular meeting that we may wish to consider addressing in the future. And I'm not proposing anything for the May town meeting. It's too soon to make any adjustments in one, but a couple of things that I had heard about, just want to get thoughts from the committee and members on. There were four things that I had heard at that town meeting that people were concerned about, is a polite way of putting it. One was the location of the meeting itself. And the issue with the location is that it was inaccessible by those who did not have access to a vehicle. It is not accessible by pedestrian ways easily, because there's actually no safe sidewalks to get there. Students have this issue as well in getting to the high school. And we happened to get lucky that there was not snow and ice on the walking paths, but that becomes a very real issue with it. So the location became a subject of debate. I'm not going to say that there was any sort of conspiracy to disenfranchise people or anything like that. It's that I don't think was the actual issue, although I have heard that. The real piece with the location is if there's a regular location for town meetings, such as the Galvin, there needs to be an exceptional reason to not have a town meeting at that location that was specifically designed with that in mind. So when the Galvin was built, that was part of the reason for the funding and behind the SBA approving the exception for the auditorium, was so that because that was the location for Wakefield town meeting. And so location is something that we may wish to put in as a codification, not necessarily a specific location, but if there's an exception to it, it needs to be extremely clearly delineated and how people are going to be accommodated to get there from the normal location. Because there's no public transportation to the high school at this time. So that's one piece. Next was the start time. Not so much the time of 9 a.m., but there were people who could not get into the building. It took about 45 minutes or so for people who were waiting in line on time to get into the building. And they didn't want to lose the ability to hear the presentation. So that's something that, again, we may want to specify how that particular piece gets handled as to should a meeting be able to start and have substance before people who are waiting, because a lot of that is due to things that are in the town's control, but not in the individual attendees' control. As long as they're there on time, but they're not denied entry because they're of a check-in process or otherwise. Third issue is, should there be a minimum amount of debate allowed? There was debate on that, but if there are people who wanted to debate, should there be a minimum amount of debate permitted so that we don't have an issue where someone just immediately goes for a motion and shuts down debate? Haven't seen that often, but it is something that is worth considering. Could be based on time or number of speakers, something along those lines. That wasn't a particular problem at this particular town meeting, but it is something that I have heard raised. And the last one is disability accommodations. Unfortunately, the town meeting was actually not very good at disability accommodations. For those who are hard of hearing, it was extremely challenging because there was cart services available, but only if you were seated where there was a screen, because there was no internet access. So you couldn't actually use the cart services if you were not actually at a screen. So disability accommodations, and there was no one there to act as an ombudsman to get those issues corrected. The town did not identify anyone to contact for disability issues for that. So those are some of the things that we may want to identify for town meetings by bylaw, just to set the expectations for the town. So those are things that I heard being in line for a long time, people on all sides of the issue without getting into the debate over the high school itself. So thoughts, comments?
I think the disability accommodations one is easy to cure. We certainly can put something in a bylaw, but just to rope off, you could have signage, you could have something to identify where folks could access CART. Doesn't mean they can sit wherever they want, perhaps, but to have carved out seating where they could access it. I know that there was, I don't know how many people we had showed up. Was it what would you say? 2,000?
The
No,
vote was, I think.
Over
1,400.
1,300, I think.
Oh, 1,300, okay. So I would be very careful with the location. I agree with you, Dan, the Galvin's better, but the Galvin couldn't have probably handled that. So I think if there is a carve out for a second location, we just want to make sure that we're not going to prevent that size of a meeting again. Like, that's my concern. The start, I know, was Bill tried to do the best he can to make sure, what person was in at 9 a.m. What was the last person standing in line, and we wouldn't start before everyone got in. That problem, I would argue, isn't maybe a bylaw. That's talking with Betsy, Tom and Steve and Betsy. Check-in could have been done very differently to facilitate a much more, a more quicker entrance into the gym. So I can see some going into the bylaws, and others I think are more, after action report with Betsy and Steve saying, how could we have moved the lines quicker? And there was certainly a way to move them quicker.
The other issue that I saw at the town meeting was just the issue of a bunch of one section's votes not having gotten counted. And when it came to the counting of the vote on the actual issue, their objections of like, hey, we weren't counted, ended up being heard and they got counted. But for the first vote, the vote to close debate, their votes, I mean, I was sitting right there, their votes were not counted, and they were assured that their vote was counted, and there was sort of nothing. I don't know if there's a procedure in place to make sure that if somebody feels their vote wasn't counted, to make sure that it was, but that it didn't matter because their votes wouldn't have changed the outcome, but their votes weren't counted.
Right.
And so I'm not sure if there's anything in bylaws or otherwise where there's a procedure that can take effect when people feel that their votes weren't counted.
Right.
Well, I could say I was actually a part of that group whose vote was not counted. So I was there. And so
Yeah.
when we sort of spoke up and said our vote wasn't counted, it was basically like, yeah, it was, sit down.
Yeah.
And then the second time when we objected, we said that our vote wasn't counted, somebody actually came over and physically counted us. But the first go around, it was like, yeah, you were, sit down. But no one looked at us. No one, I mean, we were all standing there. No one looked at us. No one came over. No one addressed us. No one really reassured us. It was just like, yeah, sit down. And then the second time they came over. So yeah,
it was definitely, it was not confidence boosting.
Right.
Down.
The town clerk herself came over and counted the second time.
The second time, yeah. But the first time, like, their votes weren't counted.
I will tell you that as somebody who was responsible for doing counting, that was very difficult. I do think that that's a good lesson learned for the future in terms of, we sign up to become tellers, and then a few moments later, you're given what sections you have to cover. I think having better preparation on that when we have a crowd of that magnitude is important in the future.
You could have, I was been counting votes for years, and I did not count that one, and I was twitching because the person counting me, our group, but I was the big middle group, they weren't pointing, they were silent. I'm like, no one has any idea. I mean, as a counter, I take my finger, I'm like, you, so they know they're being counted. I do think what Bob says is, I will never fault Betsy for one thing, but maybe the one thing a bylaw could be is, you have to have so many counters per voters. So if the counters were sworn in, and then the people just, it was much bigger, then I think we needed probably 10 more counters to just, so I don't know if that's bylaw. Again, I don't want to codify everything, or is that a conversation that, we have with the clerk's office?
And is there, I don't know, this may already be I haven't reread this section, but shouldn't there be 2 people counting each section for votes to make sure that that was just such a chaotic meeting. I was thinking to myself, I felt bad for the people who were responsible for counting. I mean, it would have been really hard to feel like your count was accurate.
Well, we were paired up.
Too. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was
But
paired.
somehow that one section just wasn't accounted.
In certain sections.
And yes, so the Galvin is a little easier because when you're up at the stage and you face the Galvin, you've got the center, the left and the right in the front, and then the left, center, and right in the back. And normally tellers are assigned for those particular 6 sections. There's 2 tellers for each section, or 3 groups of tellers, depending on how many people come in the audience, for the left, the middle, and the right. This one, anticipating a crowd of that size in the future, it would be good to have a dry run before we have to do the counting. What sections you're going to be assigned. Candidly, one of the things I found difficult, I was counting the people facing they weren't facing the stage, but they were like behind one of the baskets, if you will, is you couldn't walk down the center of them like you can at the Galvin. So you're trying to count, from left to right and also from front to back. It was not easy. And the guy I counted with, we had to do it a couple of times just to make sure that our numbers matched. It was daunting. I actually was regretting that I volunteered to be a teller. It was very difficult to do the counting. So that's a very good lesson learned.
So can I bring up a point? Since they gave us those tickets, couldn't they just give you extra tickets if there's more than one vote, and then just collect tickets like they do and just count the tickets? You know what I'm saying? They gave us a ticket. You couldn't vote without having that ticket. So if you collected those tickets and counted the ticket, right? I mean,
Just be thankful no one called for a secret ballot.
Yes,
Because the
that
vote,
was my
the
point.
vote, the vote for secret ballot is done by secret ballot, which
Yes,
it's one of the funkiest things in the process that Wakefield has.
Yeah, we should not have it, by the way. I wouldn't mind getting rid of that one.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why on my tombstone, it's going to say he didn't write the charter.
yes.
Oh, the chart is.
For any of you who don't know what we're talking about, if there's a motion for a secret ballot, first we take a secret ballot to decide whether to have a secret ballot, and it only takes a vote of 10% to win that. And then we move on to the second secret ballot vote, which is the main motion itself. So it's guaranteed to take at least half an hour in a small group. And it would have taken, I think, easily an hour in the large group we had.
And
Yes.
I was present attending the charter commission when that proposal came up. And I questioned the whole thing since then. I think a better way to do a secret ballot is to say, you get 7 people to say you want it, and then you can do it.
I would kick out the whole idea of a secret ballot myself.
But this secret ballot would have been the way to
Yeah.
assure that your vote is being counted. That's why I raised my hand several
Yeah.
speeches ago. I used to live door to the town moderator for 2 decades, and he used to pick me as a teller as a way of saying hello.
Dan, one technological point is that if Wakefield moves ultimately to using clickers, the way Linfield does and another town that I represent, then in effect, every vote is a secret ballot vote.
Yeah.
And you have a perfect count in every case.
Yeah,
It's
you don't
also
know if
pretty quick.
You don't even know if they're clicking it. I mean, how do you know if they're for you or against you? I mean, they could just be there holding the clicker. I mean,
I'm sorry, what?
if they're using clickers, you don't even, you could be
No.
questioning if they're click.
The voters have a clicker. Every voter has an
Right.
electronic device. You vote yes or no on this device. And
Oh, I see what you're
there's a
saying.
computer up front that tallies
Oh,
it,
I get you.
and it shows it on the screen immediately. Yeah.
I see. Yeah.
So that may be one way to potentially address that issue, which would be to, if the town council were to authorize electronic voting,
Mhm.
and I would think that we would want that to be something that the town council would have to do just because of the appropriation affiliated with it. For that point, it would probably, I'm not sure how it could be worded, Tom, but that could potentially supersede all bill. We might want to make it so that would supersede secret ballots, and that would effectively supersede the count by tellers section as well.
Well, where I've seen this done, it's not in the bylaws. It's just a matter of appropriation.
Okay.
You purchase the system and you use it. And I don't think you'd want to put anything in in the bylaws that obliges you to use this system, because sometimes it fails and you have to rely on, you know, the old trusted hand and voice.
Company that makes those clickers for town meeting charges $15,000 for every 500 clickers.
Isn't there software that you can use your phone?
I don't know. This was a
There
presentation
is.
made at the
Yeah.
Massachusetts Municipal Association back last summer, and the company that came in indicated that's what they charge. I don't know any other information
Yeah.
to use it, but hell, I don't even know how to get on Dropbox. Don't know.
You can use your phone to vote like you can use clickers. So, you know, if there's a backup to people who don't have phones, mobile phones. But it's something for town council to certainly look at, I would think.
Would there need to be something in the bylaws that would permit that type of voting? Or just because it's a method of voting, Tom, do you think that it would therefore be deemed acceptable?
No, I don't think you need to change the bylaws for that. Again, the two towns that I work with that have the clicker system, there's nothing in the bylaws about it.
I could certainly see that being of help for some of these issues.
Is there a requirement for the number of tellers based on the attendance, the numbers in attendance at a particular meeting?
Not currently. Just that there be tellers that are appointed.
But so you could have, so how many tellers were present for 1,300 people?
I think it was
Do
10.
you know how many tellers there were?
2, 6.
I don't remember the number off the top of my head. A lot of Betsy would have that information because we all have to sign a book. Once we get sworn to be a teller that morning, and then we have to sign a book. I don't know how many signatures are in that book.
I would say 10-ish, based on just my memory.
That's what I remember.
But that's what I would, this is, I think, a conversation, and I know Betsy's having this conversation. Betsy, as good of a meeting as was run, saw some room from improvement. So I'm guessing that discussion is happening, but we could certainly, you know, reach out to her as just the concerns after looking at this bylaw to suggest if she can put some things in place.
That's a good suggestion. Perhaps table this issue, invite Betsy and Bill Carroll, town moderator, to see what suggestions they have and if there's anything that might be appropriate for codification or not.
Mhm.
You know, the idea of potentially using clickers, while there is an expenditure, it may be something that is valuable if it makes it so that we have a higher confidence in a vote. That may be enough value, depending upon what the cost of the system is and the availability of it to work.
I think my only comment would be, I think, Dan, on your first item about the location itself. And I think I would say that it seems like we've jumped around with the town meeting between the Galvin and the high school, and I know COVID was part of that. Potentially, I don't know if it should be in a bylaw, but, on getting an understanding that we should have it at one location, unless there's a really exceptional reason, I concur with that. And I know in the past, in the old Galvin, we had big town meetings where there was overflow in the cafeteria down the hall, which I'm sure it wasn't ideal as well, but it wasn't. But, I think I kind of agree conceptually that it should kind of be in one consistent place unless there's an exceptional reason for it.
Dan,
Eric?
I remember a town meeting article that had 1,000 people for it and 1,000 people against it. And there were 3 separate meeting places. So the number of tellers, of course, was appropriate, but it still took a long time to count. And the question of cutting down the voting areas into smaller portions might be a partial thing. You just use more tellers. That's all. Thank you.
I think the biggest town meeting I've ever saw was around 2000 with the taking of Lonnie Island, where there were a few thousand people in attendance. And yes, as I recall, it was actually in the primary auditorium, cafeteria, and also in the Americal. It was in multiple venues, and big issues that can generate big debate, which is part of the beauty of town meeting. So it's just a matter of figuring out how do we make it so that the expectations are consistent so that people know what to expect and when. That a lot of these bylaws really are directory in nature for this purpose. So I think what I'm hearing from this is a lot of really good feedback. I'll reach out to Betsy and Bill, invite them to another meeting, see what thoughts they have, and if there is anything that potentially should be codified. And then we can certainly have those discussions with them, and we may end up having additional work for Tom in updates, or we may not. That seem like an appropriate action at this point?
Yeah.
Okay. With that, the chapter 104, I'm going to try and keep this part pretty clean, time-wise, and I'm aware of the hour. 104, dogs and other animals. This has been updated, as had been pointed out by Bob and Ann at the last meeting. There were updates to this that had not gotten into E-code. These have since been updated. So recommendation is feel free to take another look at E-code. If there's something that you don't see on this, please feel free to reach out. We'll take a look and compare it to the notes from the town meeting itself. But those changes should now all be up here on this. And that we can have more substantive discussion at another meeting. Chapter 112 on the E911 system, I'm recommending that we push that off to another meeting, just given the hour. So 2 items for upcoming dates. Next meeting in 2 weeks would actually be a federal holiday. And so in honor of presidents that are no longer with us, we will not meet on their particular celebrated holiday, not really either of their birthdays, but close enough. So the next meeting for us would be Monday, March 6th, 4 weeks from today. And at that point, we may have something back from the planning board if there are substantive changes. Otherwise, the idea is that we'll be able to continue moving on. Perhaps we will at that point be scheduling a first meeting with Professor Bobrowski. If provided everything's approved contractually, he may want to join us just briefly for an introduction or something along those lines remotely by Zoom. But we'll reach out to him once the contracts are approved and signed. The other item is there is a town meeting vote that is scheduled at the Galvin, to be very clear, on Saturday, March 11th, and that is to approve the debt exclusion for a replacement high school. I encourage everyone to vote. I'm not going to tell you or recommend a particular way to vote. I encourage you to vote and have your neighbors vote as well. This is a very significant project for the town, and it's something that it has certainly been in discussions for many years. I'd like to acknowledge Bob Vincent's tremendous work in being able to get the MSBA approval. He actually he was the author behind the MSBA submission. A lot of people don't realize that, well, yes, it was endorsed by the school committee, but Bob actually is the one who rewrote it so that it could get to that point. So I just want to
I appreciate
want to
you
give
guys.
that give that shout out. Because
Okay.
yes, it took a lot of work, and we wouldn't be where we are even today without that. And of course, we had a town meeting with over 1,300 people in attendance to further express their opinions on that. So please make sure that you encourage people to learn as much as they can about the project, what it's about, and then they can make their own decisions that is in their belief for what's best for the town. Any other items that should be on the agenda for the next meeting? Okay, with that, I think it is time for you can get ready on the buzzers or to be fast for our last vote of the evening. And do we have a motion to adjourn for the evening? Next meeting to be March 6th.
So moved.
Okay, Tim, after everyone really wants to keep this meeting going for as long as possible, Tim is the one who has made the motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Lisa seconds it. She really wants to get out of here quickly. So with that, we're going to change things up a little bit because people moved around on the screen. We will again go by the order in which people are on my screen. There was a little bit of shifting that went on. Okay, so with that, Joe.
Yes.
Lisa.
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
Catherine.
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
Anne.
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
And I will vote in the affirmative. So all of our votes tonight are unanimous. Much appreciation. Thank you everyone for joining us. Great to have a good meeting with everyone. Appreciate all of the input. It really makes these meetings meaningful. We actually have some incredible output to make our town better for that. So with that, thank you very much. Be on the lookout for additional things. And Bob, I'll send you links to Dropbox to make sure that you have access to it. I'll reach out to Betsy and Bill as well as Safe Streets Working Group. I have those as my to-do items. Much thanks, Tom, for joining us and staying with us and awake. Coffee may be needed for some of the bylaws that may be coming up. Bob, thank you very much for joining us as well. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Good night, everyone.
All right.
Good night.
Where am I?